Fallout London. Let's talk about that for a second. So let's start with the ugly. Installation on that is not hard, but getting it right is. And so there's a video that I'd sent Jason. It took me a while to find the right one. But Fallout London does require a couple of key things. So first, you install your game, right? And free of mods, mod folders, everything. Just vanilla Fallout 4, all DLC. So you get that installed. Then you go to GOG, get GOG Galaxy, and install the mod for Fallout London, which is like 30 gigs, which is a pretty beefy-ass mod. And then you install over the top of Fallout 4. Or, well, you download it. And then you get a rollback mod that rolls back everything that Steam did with Fallout 4. And it rolls it back to the version right before they did the next-gen patch back in March. Which, that takes a minute too. So, like, that takes about 20 minutes. And then you install the expansion over the top of that. And then you install a mod to keep it from crashing. So I did all those steps except for the mod that keeps it from crashing. And it crashed 10 times for me inside of an hour. The game just did not want to run. And then I downloaded the mod, and that helped. And then I went in and turned off, weapon debris, I guess was the thing that you had to turn off. So I turned off that. And then I still get some crashes, but it's like every 5 hours or something. It's not that bad. And then there's the part of load times. Now, I've been, afraid of installing any additional mods on top of this, right? Since it's such a total conversion. And I know that you can, but, I'm so far into the game, I don't want to mess with it. But the load times are pretty crazy. So I recorded some video for the show. And I'm going to want you to cut some of the load time out if you can, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're loading into an interior, about 30 seconds. Not horrible, not great, right? If you're loading and it says London on the door and you're loading back out into the world, again, NVMe, I've got it on a 5133 speed drive, right? Minute and a half to 2 minutes. Jeez. Loading out into London. Wow. Pretty long. Now, once you're out in London and you fast travel, it's about 30 seconds between spots. But if you're loading from an interior to the exterior, pretty hefty load time. It's hard. So, when you start out in a laboratory, not in a vault. And you can find a couple of weapons, but for the most part, you're punching shit initially. You got these little rats that pop out of the ground, like rad shrews. They're irradiated shrews, and you're punching them. I can imagine on survivor difficulty, this would be really fucking difficult if you didn't VATS as much as possible initially. And then you can find an umbrella and a knife in the laboratory on your way out into the world, if you do some searching. But there's a door really early on that the only way, once you open it, you get swarmed by rats. And that's I don't know, 3 minutes into the game. Yeah. They don't really hit that hard, but Survivor difficulty is pretty hard. I didn't play it on Survivor. I just kind of wanted a more normal experience. But you load out into the world, and then very early on, you run into some people, and you talk to those people, and based on your choices, you can get a switchblade or a butterfly knife, which they added all these custom animations for. It looks really, really cool. But that's all you got is butterfly knife, right? And ran into a handful of ghouls, just searching around, right? I, was following the quest, but I was I'm going to go check out these buildings, right? Man, it did not take long for ghouls to ice me with my butterfly knife. It was not enough. It's good enough for sneak attacks. It's good enough for a handful of things, but at level 1 or level 2, you do not have the stats. You do not have gear. You have no damage reduction on anything. You can get your ass is grass pretty fast with a butterfly knife. Thankfully, though, if you stick to the story, basically, to get you some direction, right? It gives you direction between two factions. I think the smarter way to go probably is... I guess this isn't a spoiler because I'm not going to really say. Go with the most obvious faction first, because you'll get some gear pretty quickly on, because there's a gunfight that happens pretty early on if you go with the more obvious choice. And those people that you fight with are being fought with the faction that you're fighting with, right? So they're also providing a lot of fire support. And you can just go loot dead bodies and get some gear, like, super early on. So it wasn't that far after that, like, I had a gun and a little bit of armor and enough to, like, survive, right? And so to me, that was the smarter choice, was actually going with that really obvious faction early on. But it is still pretty difficult. There's a lot more enemies in this mod than you get typically in Fallout. Settlements are not obvious at all. Like, in fact, there's not a quest to get into a settlement. At some point on, like, level 15, I was like, I need a place to store shit. The way that I was surviving is by this faction. There was a garage that had both an armor station and a weapons station in that garage, and I was storing all my junk and weapons in those stations. I cleared it out, right? Like, it just had a couple of... they're not raiders, they're hooligans. And they don't look like raiders, right? Like dudes with, like... with the little flat caps, what do they call those? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I
we all have one.
Very similar to them.
Yeah, we all have one.
Yes.
Peaky Blinder hats, right?
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So like
newsboys or whatever.
Yeah, like a newsboy hat. And so pretty early on, like, that's what I was doing. There was a little station pretty close to that faction. I'd store all my shit in that station. And then, I had the problem is it's not sharing resources. So I'd have to, like, make an itemized, like, tag items for search that I needed for, I'd empty all my junk, go look at the recipe, tag it all for search, run to the other station and only grab those things, then go back to this. It's a pain in the ass, right? It's like, I need a settlement so that I can fix this. And so I watched a video. Where are the settlements, right? Well, they're nowhere close to the starting area. So I had to trek through London. And they do some stuff that's quite a bit different than Fallout 4 in the way that they load locations. So Fallout 4, right? You've got a big open world, and there's no loading between zones, right? Fallout London is massive. And so, for instance, like, there's a big gate that you can go through to get to Westminster. And that's a whole nother zone of Fallout. And it loads in, right? And now you're in a whole nother area, a whole nother quarter of London. And so, like, and everything separated by the Thames. So you've got, like, different districts that you have to, there's, like, a couple of bridges you can get across. The water has a shitload of radiation. I think initially it was 250 rads a second, which would kill you super fast. I think they reduced it to, like, 160 or something like that. So, like, if you get in the water, you're like, oh, this is a lot of radiation, I need to get out. But it gives you enough time to get out, and then you got to take a fuckload of rad away because you've just lowered your max health significantly. But yeah, you want to stay out of the water in Fallout London. It's super dangerous. I still haven't found. I know I'm looking for a hazmat suit because I got a couple of quests that are in higher radiation zones. But the thing I was talking about it doing differently, like, there's a workshop basically, right? But it's a zone within the zone. So, like, I'm in, like, kind of central London. I found this area. There's an unmarked door. You go inside this unmarked door, and it's a whole area that you can develop, but it was filled with enemies. So I had to clear out all the enemies. And then there's a workshop in the middle, and it's a whole bunch of buildings there, so you can kind of do a conversion build, which is what I did. To give myself, like, a staging area plus, like, some stores and some crops so I can make my glue, basically. Like, have an area to store all my shit. And it doesn't take very long to load in. Like, the smaller location, the faster. Like, loading into that area is like 20 seconds maybe, or 10 seconds maybe. Like, it's pretty fast. And you can fast travel directly to it, so you don't have to go in the door. So that was a really good find for me. And then I ended up finding another one that was a big open construction site that I could scrap almost everything and kind of turn into a little area, right? which I'm using. This has a lot more plantable farmland, so I'm actually using that to plant a bunch of shit for more glue, because that's usually the thing that hangs you up is fucking wonder glue. But yeah, like having load-in locations like that is different, I think. Like it'll have these like really big areas that you load into that are like outdoor areas, but you load into it like you're walking in a door, you know? And so the whole area's got a lot of TLC. It does not look anything like Fallout. It has the vibe of Fallout 4, but like you don't even have a Pip-Boy, right? Like there's a whole story behind how these scientists copied Robco stuff to make their own stuff. And so I can't remember what it's called, but it's a little handheld thing that you have. Like it even the images, right? You don't have the Pip-Boy dude, right? The little Fallout boy. He's not there. It's like a whole different figure. It's like it's a Pip-Boy from Temu. And like completely different graphics, everything. They have some of the same perks, but different perks, right? They have some different starting perks. There's a perk that's essentially makes you lose stats for using drugs. There's so many new drugs, like I don't recommend getting it. I think of the stats called, or the perks called Puritan. I do not recommend that. I started with that perk and then immediately realized there's like 35 new drugs, right? And the drugs are kind of essential to this game. Like you got to be you got to take the drugs to survive a lot of stuff. Like even some of these will have effects like, you know, like radiation reduction while increasing health and action points and all sorts of stuff. So like they're really useful. So like, why would I fuck myself and play hard mode? Don't do drugs, kids. But it's more difficult because I think the amount and variety of enemies, and there's a lot of more legendary enemies that just kind of pop up. Some of the areas, like getting to central London from the starting area, requires you to go through a drainage tunnel that goes under the river, but it's mostly flooded and full of ghouls. And, you know, they all attack fast, and they're even done up differently than the ghouls that you're used to, right? There's a whole lot more new enemy types, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's some other enemy types that are just completely unique to this game. But yeah, the ghouls look different, but they, right, you're in a big radiated soup, and they're all like popping out from under the water, like very The Walking Dead style, getting through this super irradiated zone while you have very little Radaway early on in the game. And very little Rad-X, like you kind of have to truck pretty fast, and I took a bunch of drugs, give myself lots of action points so I could VATS my way through most of that with my crude revolver. Like, a pretty tense situation. And there's been some, like, pretty big fights where there's, like, faction wars going on, and you're in the middle of, like, these larger scale battles with, like, 50 characters on screen, which is not something that happens a lot in Fallout 4, if I remember. Only big battles I kind of remember is like there's a huge battle with the big robot, like Liberty Prime or whatever they call him in Fallout 3.
Right.
But yeah, there's these really big battles that will happen sometimes. I have a whole lot of new weapons, right? Like you have some of the staples. I'm trying to remember what's the same. Switchblade, like super really generic stuff, like a switchblade's still a switchblade. There's none of the junk weapons that you had before. They call them crude weapons, and they're completely different, like graphics and models and animations. Essentially the same concept, but just different stuff, right? Like it's probably built in the back of the stuff that looks like it's taped together and held together with rubber bands and duct tape. But yeah, they kind of got the same thing. They just call them crude weapons. They have some of the muskets. If you remember, you could find a musket in Fallout 4. They have some of that stuff, right? There's a whole faction of people that are wearing like 1800s garb that fire like muskets, and all of them are really, really fast at loading their muskets, and muskets hit really fucking hard. So I've got a whole bunch of musket weapons that I don't use very often. But you can mod those to have like laser properties to them, I guess, right? Like it adds like all these quills around the musket weapon. Like, they just redid all these models, right? Like, I think there is the laser pistol. I said last pistol like I'm playing Warhammer. It's like a laser pistol. There's a plasma pistol that has a different model on it altogether. Yeah, like most of the weapons are different and unique to this game. Like, they're not the same weapons that you had in Fallout, which is nice, right? Tons of unique weapons. You get unique items off legendary enemies, right? Like that concept's still the same. Run into a whole lot more of those. Voice acting's pretty good in spots and serviceable in others. Like sometimes it sounds like they did it on a Blue Snowball. Nothing against Blue Snowball. We used it for a long time, but it's not an extremely professional sounding mic. It's a podcast mic. I think a starting podcast mic. So, yeah, I occasionally notice a drop in quality on that. And then sometimes the motivations don't make a lot of sense for some of the things that are going on. But this is a free bolted on add-on that plays like Fallout 4, has new stuff. A little bit more linear in terms of areas to explore than Fallout 4, but not by much. And it may or may not be bigger. I still can't figure out if it's actually bigger. I haven't explored the whole area for sure. And I am 40 hours in after a week. I'm having a blast with it. Like now that I've got it to where it barely crashes, I'm having a blast with it. And it's more Fallout, right? That's got even its own unique radio stations. You still got the settlement stuff, right? Like, and it plays differently. Yeah, like there's a whole area of London, and just small spoiler, that is completely free of radiation. It's an interesting area. But yeah, like I think I was even saying in our chat, like there's a couple of moments where like there was an area where I had a timed event that I couldn't fail, right? Like I have, a minute and a half to do this thing, and I'm like swarmed with like a few beefy boss style enemies, and like I'm having to like rush through all of this stuff, and when I get it done, like there's a cutscene. Like there are cutscenes in this game. They're made in engine, right? But it was like a cutscene. I was like, wow. Right, like a whole area where I was on a train as it was moving, doing like a train style shootout, right? In the middle of the game, where I'm like going car to car, fighting my way through enemies to find the next story beat that got me the next area. There's a whole fast travel thing where you can actually use the trains in London to move from area to area, if the train's still in order. So if you wanted to, like if you're playing on survival mode where you have no fast travel, you could use the train stations to do so. Like it's just it is more difficult because the amount of enemies and the amount of legendary enemies, and like I had a really big boss I had to fight, and I waited till I have a pistol build. I waited till I had upped my automatic weapon skill so that I had something that could just dump damage out in a long stream. Before I fought that boss, and I'm glad I waited because that boss was pretty tough. That's the thing. Like the challenge is more or less about there. Again, I think on survival mode, this would be pretty fucking brutal. There's not a lot of places to sleep. And I think that's something they need to address for those that want to play survival mode. There's not a melee weapon early enough on in the game without really scouring the area to really be very effective for about 2 or 3 hours. Like there's a key quest when you start where you have to kill a ghoul. And I was looking at Reddit, just kind of seeing how people were playing, and people were having trouble with survival mode because that one ghoul can one-shot you without any gear on, and all you have is a switchblade, and you need 4 hits to kill the ghoul, right? So unless you were playing a pure strength build that had that dumped and ready to go, you probably couldn't progress past that without a sneak attack with +7 in strength or something crazy. And you'd have had to have scoured the area for something better than a fucking butterfly knife to kill that ghoul to progress that part of the story. So, and there's, survival mode relies on your save always being at a bed, and you heal a lot slower. So you have to play a lot more cautiously. You also have to eat, because eat and drink. And there's not a steady supply of water for a while until you build a settlement, to be honest with you. So, but warts and all, I like the pacing in it better than I did Fallout 4, right? Like Fallout 4 pretty early on, you got to deal with Preston Garvey bullshit, which everybody fucking hates. I don't know anybody that's like, oh, a settlement's in need of your help. Go over there. Everybody hates that part of that game. Because the endless loop of like quests to go do the one random bullshit thing. It's set up so that you discover other settlements, so you can create more settlements. Right? There's a whole lot more settlement building you can do in regular Fallout 4. I think there's 5 areas in this game, but there's none of that. It's just, you kind of have to discover it, and it's worth watching a video for where one of those are, so you can at least get started with that. Just know that you need to have at least a decent weapon to get across the Thames to get to the next area, so you can travel over there. But yeah, it's unique. It's well thought out, well made, pretty well acted. It's a 4.5 star for me right now. And I'm taking off stars because of load times and some of the story pacing and the installation, right? Like, mostly technical things. If all of that was smoothed out, this might actually be better than Fallout 4. If you're looking for Fallout 5 and you got a PC, just play Fallout London, watch a video on how to fucking install it and the mod, and you're golden.
All right, guys, and that's Nauss going over his installation and playthrough of Fallout London from episode 594, Gaming Like It's 1999. You can check out the full episode at tiltcast.com or on iTunes and Spotify. Also check out our socials, facebook.com/tiltcast and x.com/tiltcast. Hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more clips, and we will see you next time.